Welcome back. I'm still with my fellow talk presenter, Russell Quirk, political commentator as well. Let's talk about the government's counter-terrorism, counter-extremism programme. It's called Prevent, Russell. Shocking figures released to Talk today reveal that nearly 300 children under the age of 10 were referred to the anti-radicalisation scheme, and that of the nearly 7,000 referrals that were made last year up until March 24, 53%, so it's actually more than half, 3,621 were aged 17 or under. And those aged between 11 and 15 accounted for 40% of all cases. But 297 referrals were for children under the age of 10. Now, you know, I'm all for caution and safety first in this area, but do we really have to worry about kids who are under 10 years old?
I mean, is this overreactionary woke schools that in the main are perhaps reporting these kids at the slightest kind of sense that they might be of a not even a radical persuasion, but they might say something that, of course, most of the time will be inadvertent, but then might put them on the teacher's radar, and the teachers, being teachers, then go kind of, you know, crying to the authorities. I mean, the particularly remarkable stat there, Kev, is the 300 kids under 10. Now, the criminal age responsibility doesn't even kick in until 10 years old. And honestly, what do 9 and 10-year-olds know about radicalisation and extreme Islam? Or indeed, you know, if some of them might be right-wing terrorist types, big inverted commas. I mean, it seems rather pathetic.
Yeah, let me of course, you're on the right track there. By the way, these are some of the warning signs that the authorities from Prevent look for. Kids who are reading George Orwell. Well, when I was at school, you had to read George Orwell. It was part of the curriculum. And, of course, kids who are very keen on Lord of the Rings, that kind of thing. These are the terrible warning signs. But guess what? Youngsters aged between 11 and 15 accounted for 42% of right-wing referrals and 27% of Islamist referrals. And what you get in these statistics always is there is a disproportionate focusing on right-wing extremism at the expense of the real extremism we have to worry about, which is Islamist extremism. You know,
which make up the majority of all terrorism acts in this country and indeed across the world.
Exactly. Yes. When was the last time there was an extreme right-wing bombing in this country? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and look, we're not for a second saying that extreme far-rightism doesn't exist, or indeed, I mean, that there have been terrorist attacks. I mean, Joe Cox, you know, was that attack, that murder, was put down as a terrorist act by the far right. Of course, we accept that that can be the case, but we also know that 75% of people on the MI5 terror watch list are Islamists, extreme Islamists. But where do we go with this, Kev? Does this mean that if our kids play cowboys and Indians at school, that the cowboy kids are going to get slated and reported for racism? You know, if you're playing war, you know, Brits against Germans, are you xenophobic at 9 years old? I mean, how pathetic does this have to get?
Well, as you're quite right, of course, Russell, schools continue to play a key role in this nonsense, accounting for 40% of all referrals to Prevent. The police contributed 28% of all referrals. Now, when the police refer someone, you know, somebody they've nicked or somebody they've interviewed to Prevent, you know, I certainly respect that. And I guess now and again there are school kids you've got to worry about. But you know what this is. This is woke teachers, you know, who some kid has turned up and said something right-wing and they've reported them to the police. It's going on all the time, and I'm afraid it looks as if our counter-extremism programme Prevent is taking it seriously. I cannot see for the life of me why we would want to waste taxpayers' money looking into the potential radicalisation of 6-year-olds or something. You know?
I suspect this is also something that teachers that don't like particular parents are using to shame parents of certain kids. And you're right, I bet it's those that they believe to be of a so-called, big inverted commas, far-right persuasion, because little Johnny or Amy has come in and said something about small boat migrants or something of that nature, immediately reported and put on a blacklist. Are we allowed to say blacklist anymore? No, maybe we can't.
Probably not. I'll report you to the authorities for that. Racist. Just before we go to break, quickly, today, Labour's Veterans Minister, a guy called Al Carns, who's a proper guy. He's a decorated former Royal Marine. He won the Military Cross. He served 5 tours in Afghanistan, and he's not speaking Starmer speak. He warned that unless we increase spending on defence pretty sharpish, we're in big trouble. And he said the armed forces now are so depleted with our current investment on our armed forces, they're so depleted that if we had a war today, a large-scale war, and let's face it, it's possible, our troops would be wiped out probably within 6 months.
Unbelievable, isn't it? And I suspect, and you can call me a cynic if you like, this is Keir Starmer and others depleting our army so that he can then support and promote a European army to replace our own. This, of course, we know is something that Remainers and those on the left want. They want to see effectively Ursula von der Leyen in charge of an army that is a EU army, because of course they know best. So I wonder if this is a bit like that, you know, the German Air Force base that's now landed in Scotland for our protection. When I was presenting a show a few weeks ago, we had a brilliant caller call in and say this is all about that creeping, that mission creep to effectively introduce a European-wide army, of course, which we will have no sovereign control over.
Yeah, look, we've got an extreme socialist government here. I mean, it's obvious, virtual Marxists, you know, taking all the money from the private sector to give it to the public sector. You know, economic stagnation because they just want to bleed industry dry so they can pay civil servants and train drivers a lot of money. So this is an extreme socialist government. Socialist governments do not like spending on defence. They kind of believe in the brotherhood of man, come by our, we don't want weapons, don't make war, make love and all this kind of crap. Well, Labour, nevertheless, we spend just over 2% of our gross domestic product on defence, which is just about within the rules for NATO, but only just. And Labour, in their manifesto, pledged to raise defence spending to 2.5%, which I think was just electioneering. Guess what? Since coming into power, Keir Starmer has repeatedly refused to reveal when that target might be met. And I'll tell you when it will be met, Russell, the 12th of never. It will never be met.
Yeah. In fact, in his manifesto, he said it will be introduced 2.5% of GDP as defence spending at some point in the future. Well, that's helpful, isn't it? Some point in the future.
Unbelievable, unbelievable.